Have you ever felt like you're running a race you never signed up for? A race where the finish line keeps moving further away. Where no matter how fast you run, how much you achieve, or how hard you try, it never feels like enough. Maybe you wake up every morning with a sense of obligation rather than excitement, constantly measuring your worth against the expectations of others, your family, your colleagues, society. Maybe you've spent years chasing after approval, only to feel emptier the closer you get to it. And when you finally have a quiet moment to yourself, a nagging voice inside asks, "Why am I doing all this? What am I really looking for?" It's not just you. This is the world we live in. A world where validation from others often dictates our self-worth. A world where the pressure to succeed, to be admired, to be seen as enough never truly fades. Social media bombards us with images of lives that seem perfect, making us wonder if we're missing out. Friends and family, sometimes unintentionally, set expectations that we feel obligated to meet. And as we navigate relationships, careers, and personal ambitions, we end up tangled in a web of responsibilities, fears, and unspoken anxieties. We chase after happiness like it's a destination, believing that once we get there, all our worries will disappear. But does that ever really happen? If we stop for a moment and look at the bigger picture, we start to see a pattern. The more we cling to the idea that happiness comes from external success, the more fragile our happiness becomes. If our sense of peace depends on a relationship, what happens when that relationship ends? If it's built on financial success, what happens if we lose everything overnight? If it's based on praise and recognition, what happens when people's opinions change? The truth is, the things we chase, love, wealth, status, are all impermanent. They shift like sand beneath our feet. And the tighter we hold on, the more they slip away. This is exactly what Buddhism has been teaching for over 2.500 years. At the heart of Buddhist philosophy is a simple but profound truth: suffering comes from attachment. Not just attachment to things, but attachment to ideas, identities, and expectations. We suffer because we crave control over things that are beyond our control. We suffer because we seek happiness in things that, by their very nature, are temporary. But what if the solution isn't to chase more, do more, or be more? What if true freedom comes not from changing the outside world, but from transforming the way we see it? Imagine, just for a moment, what it would feel like to be completely at peace, not because life is perfect, but because you no longer need it to be. Imagine being able to face uncertainty without fear, to experience change without resistance, to let go of things that no longer serve you without regret. Imagine a kind of happiness that isn't dependent on circumstances, but is simply part of who you are. This isn't some distant, unattainable dream. It's possible, and it begins the moment you turn inward. The question is, how do we get there? How do we break free from the cycle of suffering, stress, and dissatisfaction? The answer lies in understanding ourselves, not as we think we should be, but as we truly are. It lies in recognizing that peace isn't something we have to search for, it's something we uncover when we let go of the illusions that keep us trapped. By applying the timeless wisdom of Buddhism, we can learn to free ourselves from unnecessary suffering, to embrace impermanence with grace, and to cultivate a happiness that is deep, unshakable, and real. This journey isn't about blind faith or abstract philosophy. It's about practical, life-changing insights that you can start applying today. In the next few minutes, we'll explore 10 powerful lessons drawn from Buddhist teachings, lessons that will help you shift your perspective, regain control of your inner world, and find a kind of peace that no external force can take away. These are not just ideas, they are a way of life. A path that has helped millions find clarity, resilience, and true fulfillment. So take a deep breath. Let go of whatever distractions are pulling at your attention. This is your time, your moment, your invitation to step back from the noise and reconnect with what truly matters. Because the peace you've been searching for isn't somewhere out there, it's been within you all along. Let's begin. 1. Self-love, letting go of the ego. There is a quiet suffering that lingers beneath the surface of our search for love. We long to be seen, to be cherished, to be understood. We believe that when we find the right person, the right community, or the right level of success, then, finally, we will feel complete. But if we take a step back and look honestly at this pursuit, we might begin to see that what we are really seeking is not love itself, but relief. Relief from loneliness. Relief from self-doubt. Relief from the quiet fear that without external validation, we are not enough. This is where suffering begins. The more we look outside of ourselves for love, the more fragile our happiness becomes. If our sense of worth is tied to someone else's presence, what happens when they leave? If our confidence is built upon praise, what happens when it fades? If we define ourselves by achievements, what happens when we fall short? The painful truth is that everything outside of us is temporary. People change. Circumstances shift. Relationships evolve. And if we do not cultivate a love that is rooted within, we will spend our lives chasing a kind of security that does not exist. Buddhism teaches that self-love is not a luxury, it is the foundation for true peace. But self-love is often misunderstood. It is not about indulging in fleeting pleasures or inflating the ego. It is not about telling ourselves we are perfect or ignoring our flaws. True self-love is about recognition. It is about seeing ourselves fully, our strengths, our wounds, our imperfections, and meeting all of it with kindness. It is about understanding that just as every other being deserves compassion, so do we. Yet, for many, this is the hardest lesson to embrace. We are often our own harshest critics. We hold ourselves to impossible standards, replay our past mistakes, and speak to ourselves in ways we would never speak to a friend. When others suffer, we offer them patience and encouragement. But when we suffer, we tell ourselves we should have done better. We confuse self-criticism with self-improvement, believing that if we are hard enough on ourselves, we will somehow become worthy. But no one has ever healed through self-punishment. No one has ever grown through self-rejection. The path to true self-love begins with a shift in perspective. Instead of seeing ourselves as projects to be fixed, we must learn to see ourselves as beings to be understood. Instead of waiting for love to come from outside, we must cultivate it within. One of the most profound ways to do this is through metta-bhavana, the practice of loving-kindness meditation. This meditation begins with a simple but powerful act, offering words of compassion to yourself. May I be happy. May I be at peace. May I be free from suffering. At first, these words may feel unnatural. Many of us struggle to direct kindness inward, especially if we have spent years believing we do not deserve it. But with time, this practice reshapes our relationship with ourselves. It teaches us that love does not need to be earned, it can simply be given. When we practice self-love in this way, something shifts. We stop seeking validation in places that cannot sustain us. We stop relying on others to fill a void that only we have the power to heal. And perhaps most importantly, we stop resisting our own humanity. We begin to embrace ourselves, not just when we are at our best, but also when we struggle, when we make mistakes, when we fall short. We recognize that we are not meant to be perfect, we are meant to be real. True self-love is not conditional. It is not based on how much we achieve. how much we are admired, or how well we fit the expectations of others. It is an inner steadiness, a quiet confidence, a deep knowing that no matter what happens in the external world, we are whole as we are. And when we reach this place, when we no longer need the world to affirm our worth, something incredible happens. We become free. Free from the exhausting need to prove ourselves. Free from the fear of rejection. Free from the belief that love is something we must chase, rather than something we already carry within us. And when we love ourselves in this way, we do not just transform our own lives, we transform the way we love others. Because when we are no longer searching for love to complete us, we are able to offer it freely, without expectation or need. We are able to love without grasping, without clinging, without fear. We are able to love not because we need something in return, but simply because love has become the most natural thing to give. This is the love that Buddhism speaks of. A love that is not dependent, but expansive. A love that does not waver with circumstances, but remains steady in all conditions. A love that, once cultivated within, extends effortlessly to the world around us. It is not something to be found, it is something to be remembered. And once we remember it, we are never the same again. 2. The impermanence of time. Don't waste your life. We spend much of our lives waiting for the perfect moment to start, waiting for a better time to pursue what truly matters, waiting for life to somehow arrange itself in a way that finally makes sense. But the moment we are waiting for never comes. There's always another excuse, another delay, another reason to put off what our heart knows is important. We tell ourselves that we will focus on what really matters later, when we have more money, when our responsibilities lessen, when we feel ready. But if we look closely, we realize that later is an illusion. There is no future moment that is more real than the one we have right now. Buddhism teaches that everything is impermanent. Nothing stays the same, not our relationships, not our emotions, not even our own bodies. Yet, we live as if we are exceptions to this rule. We act as though time is something we can store away for future use, as if the days we waste will somehow return to us when we are finally ready to use them well. But time is not like money, it does not accumulate in a savings account, waiting to be withdrawn when it is most convenient. Time is spent the moment it is given, and once it is gone, it never returns. If we understood this deeply, how differently would we live? How many of our worries would fade if we truly accepted that we do not have time to waste on trivial concerns? How much more fully would we love if we knew, without a doubt, that every moment with the people we care about is temporary? If we knew that today might be the last time we get to share a meal, a laugh, a moment of connection with someone, wouldn't we be more present? Wouldn't we hold them a little longer? Listen a little deeper? Appreciate them a little more? But instead, we let time slip through our fingers. We get lost in distractions, mindless scrolling, endless worries, conversations that add nothing to our lives. We live in our heads, replaying past mistakes or obsessing over what the future holds, all while the present moment passes us by unnoticed. We waste hours, days, years, assuming we have plenty more ahead of us. But the truth is, none of us know how much time we have left. We assume there will be another chance, another day, another opportunity, until suddenly, there isn't. This is not meant to be a frightening realization, but an awakening. When we recognize that time is slipping away, we stop waiting. We stop postponing the things that matter most. We stop assuming that happiness is something we will find later and start realizing that it is only ever found now. Mindfulness is the key to living fully. It is the practice of being here, completely, wholeheartedly, with full awareness. It teaches us to savor a simple moment, to experience life as it unfolds, rather than treating each day as something to get through. The next time you eat a meal, try eating it slowly, paying attention to every bite. The next time you are with someone you love, put your phone away. Make eye contact. Truly listen. The next time you feel the urge to rush through a task, pause and ask yourself, why am I in such a hurry? Where am I really trying to go? The only place we can ever truly be is here. Living with this awareness does not mean rushing to do everything at once. It does not mean forcing ourselves into a frantic pursuit of achievement. It simply means becoming more conscious of how we spend our time. It means making space for what truly matters. It means choosing depth over distraction, presence over preoccupation, and meaning over mindlessness. Imagine looking back on your life years from now. What do you want to remember? Do you want to remember that you spent most of your time worrying about things that never happened? That you were too busy chasing something in the future to appreciate what was already in front of you? Or do you want to remember a life that was fully lived, a life where you were present for the big moments, the small moments, and everything in between? A life where you did not wait for permission to start living, but embraced each day as the gift that it was? The truth is, life is happening now, whether we choose to engage with it or not. The clock will keep ticking. The seasons will keep changing. And each of us will move closer to the end of our journey. The question is, will we have truly lived? Will we have used the time we were given in a way that brings us peace? That deepens our relationships. That allows us to experience the fullness of being alive. This is your moment. Right now. Not tomorrow. Not someday. Not when things feel easier. Now. What will you do with it? 3. Self-reliance. Take responsibility for your own karma. It is a comforting illusion to believe that something outside of us will come to our rescue, that if we just wait, if we just hope, if we just endure, life will eventually fix itself. We tell ourselves that happiness will arrive when the right person loves us, when the right opportunity appears, when the world finally aligns in our favor. But life does not work that way. No one is coming to save us. No relationship, no success, no amount of wealth or recognition can give us the lasting peace we seek. Buddhism teaches us that our suffering, our joy, and our entire experience of life do not come from what happens to us, they come from how we respond. There is a moment in everyone's life when they realize that blaming others no longer serves them. It may come after heartbreak, after failure, or after years of frustration. But at some point, we must confront a simple truth: we are responsible for our own happiness. The world is not here to cater to our expectations. People will disappoint us. Circumstances will not always be fair. But suffering is not born from these events, it is born from our resistance to them. If we continue to blame our past, our upbringing, or the actions of others, we give away our power. We remain trapped in a cycle where our well-being is dictated by forces we cannot control. Taking responsibility does not mean denying our pain. It does not mean pretending that life has always been fair or that we have not been hurt. It simply means choosing to move forward despite it all. It means understanding that no matter what has happened in the past, we are still the ones who must decide what comes next. We can either let our wounds define us, or we can use them as stepping stones to strength and wisdom. The Buddha did not promise an easy path. He did not say that life would be without pain. But he taught that we have the power to change our relationship with that pain, to transform it, to rise above it. Self-reliance is not isolation. It does not mean we must walk this journey alone or that we should never seek guidance. What it does mean is that no one can walk this path for us. Others can offer wisdom, but we must choose to listen. Others can inspire us, but we must choose to take action. Others can show us kindness, but we must choose to cultivate that kindness within ourselves. No one can meditate for us. No one can practice patience for us. No one can cultivate our inner peace on our behalf. That work is ours alone. In a world that often encourages dependence on relationships, on status, on external validation, choosing self-reliance is a radical act. It is deciding that you are not waiting for someone else to complete you. It is realizing that your worth is not dependent on how others see you. It is embracing the truth that everything you need to be happy, to be at peace, to be whole, is already within you. This is not about being invincible. It is not about never needing support or never feeling vulnerable. It is about knowing that even in your weakest moments, you are still capable. That even when you feel lost, you can still find your way. That even when life knocks you down, you have the strength to stand up again, not because someone else lifts you, but because you have built a foundation within yourself that cannot be broken. Cultivating self-reliance is a practice, one that takes time and patience. It begins with small acts, choosing to meditate instead of seeking distractions, choosing to take responsibility for your emotions rather than blaming someone else, choosing to meet your challenges with curiosity instead of avoidance. It is in these moments that we reclaim our power, that we begin to trust ourselves, that we realize we are not as helpless as we once believed. Imagine looking back on your life years from now. What do you want to see? A life spent waiting for happiness to arrive? Or a life where you took control of your own destiny? A life spent blaming circumstances? Or a life where you rose above them? The truth is, no one can answer these questions for you. No one can make these choices for you. The responsibility and the power lies with you. This is the path of true freedom. Not a freedom that depends on perfect circumstances, but a freedom that comes from knowing that no matter what happens, you are enough. And you always have been. 4. Learning to say no. Protect your energy with wisdom. We grow up believing that saying yes is the path to connection, to approval, to being seen as kind and generous. We learn that accommodating others is a virtue, that self-sacrifice is a sign of goodness. And yet, beneath this constant willingness to please, so many people feel exhausted, overwhelmed, and disconnected from themselves. They move through life carrying burdens that were never theirs to bear, saying yes out of fear rather than choice. They ignore their own needs to avoid disappointing others. And in doing so, they slowly abandon themselves. Buddhism teaches that saying no is not an act of selfishness, it is an act of wisdom. When the Buddha left behind his royal life, he was not rejecting his family, nor was he turning his back on the world. He was choosing a path that aligned with truth. He saw that if he remained in a life that no longer served his spiritual growth, he would never find peace. And so, he let go, not with resentment, but with clarity. This is the lesson we must learn. To set boundaries is not to reject others, but to protect our own well-being. It is not about shutting people out, but about deciding who and what is worth our time, energy, and emotional investment. Too often, we say yes out of obligation, out of habit, out of the deep-seated fear that if we do not, we will no longer be loved or accepted. But love that requires constant self-sacrifice is not love, it is a transaction. An approval that comes at the cost of our own peace is too heavy a price to pay. To truly live in alignment with our inner truth, we must ask ourselves, what am I saying yes to? And in doing so, what am I saying no to? Every time we say yes to something that drains us, we say no to something that could nourish us. We say no to rest, no to personal growth, no to the things that truly matter. And the more we say yes to things that do not serve us, the further we drift from ourselves. There is great power in understanding that not everything requires your participation. Not every argument needs your voice. Not every event needs your presence. Not every request deserves your energy. You are allowed to say no to invitations, to obligations, to relationships that leave you feeling depleted. You are allowed to walk away from things that disrupt your peace. And you do not need to justify your boundaries to those who do not respect them. This does not mean becoming indifferent or unkind. The middle way, one of the core teachings of Buddhism, reminds us that balance is essential. We must not harden ourselves so much that we become isolated, nor must we give so much of ourselves that we lose our center. There is a difference between offering kindness and allowing ourselves to be used. There is a difference between being compassionate and carrying burdens that are not ours to bear. True wisdom lies in knowing when to give and when to step back. Imagine for a moment that your energy is like water in a cup. If you keep pouring for others without refilling your own, eventually, you will have nothing left to give. This is why saying no is not an act of selfishness, it is an act of preservation. It ensures that when you do say yes, you are doing so from a place of abundance rather than depletion. To practice this in daily life, start small. The next time someone asks something of you, pause before responding. Ask yourself, is this something I truly want to do? Or am I saying yes out of guilt or fear? If it is not aligned with your well-being, practice saying no with kindness but firmness. You do not need an elaborate explanation. A simple, "I appreciate you asking, but I can't commit to that right now" is enough. The people who respect you will understand. The people who do not, well, perhaps they were only benefiting from your lack of boundaries in the first place. Over time, as you strengthen your ability to set limits, something beautiful happens. You begin to reclaim your time, your energy, and your sense of self. You start living not for the approval of others, but in alignment with your own truth. And in doing so, you become lighter, freer, and more at peace. This is the gift of learning to say no. It is not about rejecting the world, it is about making space for what truly matters. It is about honoring yourself, so that when you do choose to give, you do so wholeheartedly, with no resentment, no exhaustion, no regret. And in that space of clarity and peace, you will find that your yes becomes even more powerful because it will be a reflection of your truth, not a reaction to someone else's expectations. 5. Cultivating inner peace amidst chaos. Life does not wait for us to be ready. It does not pause so we can find a moment of stillness before the next challenge arrives. The world moves relentlessly, unexpected changes, losses, uncertainties, and pressures all unfolding without warning. Some days, it feels like no matter how hard we try to create stability, life continues to pull us into chaos. But Buddhism teaches that true peace does not come from controlling the world. It comes from mastering how we respond to it. Imagine standing in the middle of a storm. The wind howls, the rain pours, and everything around you is in motion. Most people, caught in a storm, panic. They try to hold on to things that are being swept away. They curse the wind. They resist the rain, exhausting themselves in a battle they cannot win. But a wise person stands still. They do not fight the storm, they observe it, knowing it will pass. They understand that their peace does not come from stopping the wind, but from staying rooted despite it. This is what it means to cultivate inner peace. It is the understanding that the world will never be entirely free from suffering, that hardships will always arise, that uncertainty is woven into the nature of existence. But just because the world is chaotic does not mean our minds have to be. A person who has learned to master their mind does not seek peace in external circumstances, because they know that external peace is temporary. Instead, they build a peace that is steady, one that is not dependent on what happens around them. One of the greatest causes of suffering is resistance, the belief that things should be different than they are. We resist change because we want certainty. We resist loss because we want permanence. We resist pain because we want comfort. But Buddhism teaches that suffering does not come from these experiences themselves, it comes from our refusal to accept them. The more we fight reality, the more we suffer. But when we stop resisting, when we accept that change is inevitable, that loss is part of life, that we cannot control everything, something incredible happens. We find freedom. This does not mean we should be passive or indifferent. It does not mean we should accept injustice or tolerate harm. It simply means that we must stop attaching our inner state to the conditions of the outer world. If our peace depends on everything going our way, then we will never truly be at peace. But if our peace is built on the ability to stay present, to stay mindful, to stay centered no matter what arises, then nothing can take it from us. The practice of Vipassana meditation teaches us exactly this. In Vipassana, we do not try to escape thoughts, nor do we try to control them. We simply observe them as they arise and pass. Just as we observe emotions, sensations, and experiences. This simple act of witnessing, of not attaching to every thought or feeling, rewires our relationship with reality. We begin to see that emotions, like everything else, are impermanent. Anger arises, and if we do not feed it, it fades. Fear arises, and if we do not cling to it, it dissolves. Nothing lasts forever, not even suffering. Breath awareness is another practice that anchors us in the present. In moments of stress, the breath reminds us that we are here. Now, it pulls us out of the endless loops of worry about the future or regret about the past. It is a reminder that this moment, right now, is the only one that truly exists. And in this moment, if we choose, we can find peace. Non-attachment is perhaps the most liberating practice of all. It does not mean that we do not care. It does not mean that we detach from love, joy, or the beauty of life. It means that we stop grasping. We stop clinging to people, to outcomes, to identities, to control. We learn to appreciate everything while needing nothing to stay the same. We hold everything with an open hand, knowing that just as the sun rises and sets, just as the seasons change, everything in life moves through cycles. And when we let go of the illusion that we can control it all, we finally exhale. We finally find space to breathe. This is the great paradox of inner peace. The more we try to force it, the further it moves away from us. The more we try to control life, the more chaotic it feels. But when we surrender, not in defeat, but in deep acceptance, we find that the peace we were searching for was never outside of us. It was within us all along. It was simply waiting for us to stop looking elsewhere. 6. Caring for your body and mind. Health is a spiritual practice. The search for peace often begins in the mind. But true well-being cannot exist in a mind that inhabits an exhausted, neglected body. The two are not separate. When one suffers, the other follows. A mind burdened by stress manifests in fatigue, headaches, tension. A body deprived of rest and proper care clouds the mind, making even the simplest thoughts feel heavy. Yet, in our pursuit of spiritual growth, we often forget this connection. We seek wisdom, clarity, and enlightenment, but we do not ask ourselves the most basic question: how can I cultivate inner peace if I am not caring for the vessel that carries me? Buddhism teaches that the path to awakening is not about deprivation or indulgence, it is about balance. The Buddha himself once pursued extreme asceticism, believing that by denying the body, he could transcend suffering. But starvation and self-punishment did not bring him closer to enlightenment. It only brought weakness. illness, and a mind too clouded by pain to see clearly. It was only when he embraced the middle way, neither excess nor deprivation, that he found true clarity. This is the wisdom we must carry into our own lives. Self-care is not a distraction from the spiritual path, it is part of the path. There is a difference between treating the body as a tool for enlightenment and treating it as an object for vanity. The world encourages us to see our bodies through the lens of comparison, to judge them by their appearance rather than their function. But the purpose of caring for the body is not to meet a standard of beauty, it is to create a foundation for clarity, energy, and longevity. It is to move through life with ease, rather than being weighed down by fatigue, stress, and discomfort. It is to create a vessel strong enough to support a mind that seeks wisdom. Every day, our body speaks to us. It tells us when it is tired, when it is hungry, when it is in pain. But do we listen? Too often, we ignore these signals, pushing ourselves beyond exhaustion, numbing discomfort with distractions, eating mindlessly, treating rest as something to be earned rather than something essential. We treat our bodies as machines, expecting them to function despite neglect. And then we wonder why we feel drained, anxious, or unbalanced. To care for the body is to engage in mindfulness. It is to eat with awareness, appreciating the nourishment food provides rather than consuming in distraction. It is to move with intention, whether through walking, stretching, or exercise, not as a punishment, but as a celebration of what the body can do. It is to rest without guilt, understanding that sleep is not a luxury, but a necessity. It is to breathe deeply, to drink water with gratitude, to stretch after long hours of sitting, to honor the small, simple acts that sustain life. The mind, too, requires nourishment. It requires moments of stillness, free from overstimulation. It requires boundaries, spaces where it can exist without being bombarded by distractions, notifications, or worries. It requires breaks from the endless cycle of consumption, whether it be excessive media, negative thoughts, or stress that we carry but do not release. When we declutter the mind, when we let go of unnecessary noise, we make space for clarity, for peace, for a deeper connection with ourselves. Health, then, is not just about diet and exercise, it is about harmony. It is about recognizing that when the body and mind work together, life feels lighter. That when we move through the day with energy rather than exhaustion, when we nourish ourselves rather than deplete ourselves, we are more present, more aware, more capable of deep spiritual practice. And when both the body and mind are in alignment, something profound happens. Inner peace stops being something we chase and becomes something we embody. The way we treat ourselves is the way we experience life. A restless mind will see the world as chaotic. A depleted body will see the world as heavy. But a mind at peace and a body in balance will see life for what it truly is, a fleeting, precious gift that is meant to be lived fully. And to live fully, we must care for the only home we will ever truly have, ourselves. 7. Managing wealth with Buddhist wisdom, the art of simplicity. We spend so much of our lives chasing wealth, believing that if we just had a little more, we would finally feel secure, finally be happy. But money is like water in our hands. The tighter we grip it, the more it slips through our fingers. We tell ourselves that success is measured by numbers, by possessions, by how much we own. But Buddhism teaches a different kind of wealth. True wealth is not in accumulation but in freedom. It is not about how much we have, it is about how little we need to be at peace. The world encourages us to believe that happiness is always just one step away, one promotion, one investment, one big purchase from finally feeling fulfilled. And yet, no matter how much we gain. There is always more to chase. A person with $1,000 dreams of 10,000. A person with 10,000 longs for 100,000. Even millionaires worry about losing what they have. The more we attach ourselves to money, the more we become enslaved by it. The irony is that wealth, which promises freedom, so often becomes a cage. Buddhism does not reject money, nor does it suggest that wealth is inherently bad. It simply asks us to look at our relationship with it. Are we using money? Or is money using us? Are we making financial decisions from a place of wisdom? Or from fear and attachment? Do we see money as a tool? Or do we believe it defines our worth? These are the questions that determine whether wealth is a source of suffering or a means to something greater. The Buddha taught the value of simplicity, not as a rejection of abundance, but as a recognition of what truly matters. Simplicity does not mean deprivation, it means clarity. It means understanding that material wealth, when used mindfully, can bring comfort and security. But when it becomes an obsession, it can consume our lives, filling us with anxiety, comparison, and an insatiable hunger for more. To practice financial mindfulness, we must shift our perspective from accumulation to appreciation. Instead of constantly seeking more, we can learn to ask, what is enough? This does not mean rejecting ambition or refusing to pursue success. It means defining success on our own terms, not by external standards, but by inner peace. A person with little but a peaceful mind is far richer than a person with millions and an anxious heart. Generosity is one of the greatest antidotes to attachment. When we give freely, whether through charity, kindness, or simply sharing what we have, we loosen the grip that money has over us. We begin to see wealth not as something to hoard, but as something that flows. The act of giving shifts our mindset from scarcity to abundance. It reminds us that we already have enough, and that true security is not in what we own, but in how we live. Mindfulness in spending is another practice that transforms our relationship with money. Instead of chasing every desire, we can pause and ask, does this bring me true happiness? Or is it just a temporary thrill? So much of what we buy is not out of necessity, but out of habit, impulse, or social pressure. By becoming intentional with our spending, we free ourselves from unnecessary stress. We begin to value quality over quantity, meaning over excess. Security is not found in accumulating wealth, but in understanding that nothing in this world is permanent. Even the richest people cannot take their wealth with them when they leave this life. But what they can leave behind is generosity, kindness, and a legacy of living with wisdom. The goal is not to reject money, but to use it wisely to support our well-being, to help others, to create a life that is rich in meaning, not just in numbers. There is a freedom in simplicity, a freedom in knowing that happiness is not for sale. That peace cannot be bought. That true wealth is found in a mind that is unburdened. When we stop chasing excess, we find contentment in what we already have. And in that contentment, we discover the greatest form of wealth, one that no amount of money can buy. 8. Maintaining integrity in relationships, compassion over possession. We long for connection. We crave love, understanding, and a sense of belonging. We seek relationships to fill the spaces within us, believing that if we find the right person, the right partner, the right friend, we will finally feel whole. But so often, what begins as love turns into attachment. What begins as care turns into expectation. And what begins as joy turns into suffering. The reason is simple: we mistake possession for love. Buddhism teaches that true love is not about control. It is not about shaping another person to fit our needs. Nor is it about demanding that they never change, never leave, never disappoint us. Real love is about freedom, the ability to care for someone while allowing them to be fully themselves. It is about acceptance, the willingness to see another person as they are, not as we wish them to be. And above all, it is about compassion, the ability to give without expecting something in return. Many relationships suffer not because love fades, but because attachment grows too strong. We become attached to how someone makes us feel, to the role they play in our lives, to the idea that they are responsible for our happiness. And when they change, when they fail to meet our expectations, when they act in ways we do not understand, we suffer not because of their actions, but because we have built our sense of self around them. Love cannot thrive under the weight of expectation. When we expect someone to make us happy, to never hurt us, to fulfill our needs in every way, we are not loving them, we are using them. We are placing upon them a burden that no human being can carry. And when they inevitably fail to meet that impossible standard, we feel betrayed. But in truth, they did not betray us, we betrayed ourselves by expecting permanence in a world that is constantly changing. So how do we love without attachment? How do we care deeply without clinging? The answer is found in letting go, not of love itself, but of our need to control it. To love with wisdom is to recognize that every person we meet is on their own journey. They have their own path, their own struggles, their own evolution. We do not own them, and they do not exist to complete us. When we stop demanding that love serve our needs, we begin to experience a love that is far deeper, one that is rooted in true compassion rather than possession. This shift in perspective is not easy. We have been conditioned to believe that love means attachment, that commitment means control, that caring means dependency. But Buddhism teaches that love is not about grasping, it is about giving. When we love with awareness, we give without expecting in return. We appreciate rather than possess. We cherish rather than demand. This does not mean we do not set boundaries or that we allow ourselves to be mistreated. It simply means that we love without trying to trap or change the person we love. There is great peace in this kind of love. It allows us to experience deep connection without fear of loss. It allows us to embrace change rather than resist it. It teaches us that every moment with someone we love is precious, not because it will last forever, but because it exists now. When we stop clinging to the illusion of permanence, we become free to love fully, without fear, without resentment, without regret. The next time you feel hurt or disappointed in a relationship, ask yourself, am I suffering because of what this person has done, or because of what I expected them to do? This question holds the key to wisdom. It reminds us that most of our pain does not come from love itself, but from the attachments we place upon it. To love deeply, but hold lightly, to care fully, but without clinging, this is the essence of true compassion. When we begin to love in this way, everything changes. We no longer fear loss, because we understand that nothing was ours to begin with. We no longer grasp at love, because we see that love, in its purest form, is not something to be owned, but something to be shared. And in this freedom, in this acceptance, in this deep and quiet compassion, we finally discover what love was meant to be all along. 9. Speak less. Act more, the power of silent wisdom. We live in an age where words are everywhere, spoken, written, posted, shared, debated. We fill our days with conversation, with commentary, with opinions we feel compelled to express. But how often do those words lead to real change? How often do they carry true meaning? In a world where speaking is easy, action has become rare. And yet, Buddhism reminds us that wisdom is not found in what we say, but in how we live. We see this everywhere. People talk about kindness, But how many truly practice it? People share quotes about mindfulness, yet spend their days lost in distraction. People argue about what is right, but do little to embody the values they defend. It is easy to say the right things, to present ourselves in a way that appears wise, compassionate, or enlightened. But words alone are not enough. It is our actions, not our speeches, that reveal who we truly are. The Buddha himself taught not through grand declarations, but through the way he lived. He did not seek to convince others with words alone, he demonstrated wisdom in every step, every decision, every moment of his existence. And in doing so, he changed lives without needing to raise his voice. This is the power of silent wisdom. It is not about withholding speech, nor is it about being passive. It is about knowing when words serve a purpose and when they are merely noise. Every word carries energy. Every sentence we speak has the potential to heal or to harm, to bring clarity or confusion, to uplift or to divide. Yet, so often, we speak without thought. We react instead of reflect. We use words to fill the silence, afraid of what might arise if we simply sat with our thoughts. But silence itself is not empty. Silence allows us to listen, to observe, to understand before we respond. And from that understanding, our words, when they do come, carry far more weight. Before speaking, we can ask ourselves 3 simple questions. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? If the answer to any of these is no, then perhaps silence is the better path. But this does not mean silence is always the answer. There are moments when words are needed, when speaking out against injustice, when offering comfort to someone in pain, when sharing knowledge that has the power to help others. The key is to speak with intention, rather than impulse. To use our words not as weapons, but as tools for clarity and connection. But beyond silence, there is something even more powerful: action. If you want to inspire, do not tell people what they should do, show them through your own example. If you wish for kindness in the world, do not simply talk about it, practice it in every interaction. If you long for change, do not wait for others to make it happen, become the change yourself. A single act of integrity is more powerful than 1,000 words about morality. A quiet moment of generosity speaks louder than any declaration of good intentions. This is why the wisest among us often say the least. They do not waste time in endless debate. They do not seek to prove themselves through arguments or appearances. They do not need to announce their wisdom, because it is evident in the way they live. Their presence alone teaches more than any speech ever could. Imagine for a moment a world where people spoke less and acted more, where instead of making promises, people simply followed through, where instead of talking about mindfulness, they embodied presence, where instead of arguing about what is right, they quietly lived by their values. How much unnecessary conflict would fade? How much deeper would our connections become? How much more meaningful would life feel? This is not about withdrawing from conversation. It is not about refusing to speak when words are needed. It is about aligning our speech with truth and our actions with purpose. It is about recognizing that wisdom is not about having the loudest voice, but the clearest heart. That real influence does not come from persuasion, but from example. That the most profound teachings are not found in words, but in the way we choose to move through the world. So speak less. Act more. Let your life be your greatest teaching. Because in the end, it is not what we say that defines us, it is what we do. 10. Reconnecting with nature, seeing the Dharma in everything. There is a quiet wisdom in nature that speaks without words, that teaches without effort. The trees do not cling to their leaves when autumn arrives. The river does not resist the rocks in its path. The clouds do not struggle against the wind. Everything in nature exists in harmony with change, embracing impermanence rather than fearing it. And yet, as human beings, we spend so much of our lives resisting what is natural. We fear loss. We fight against time. We try to hold on to what was never meant to stay. But if we look closely, nature offers us a different way to live, one of acceptance, presence, and flow. Buddhism teaches that the Dharma, the fundamental truths of existence, can be found in everything. If we know how to look, in the cycle of the seasons, we see the impermanence of all things. In the way a tree bends with the wind instead of breaking, we see the wisdom of adaptability. In the way a flower blooms not for praise, but simply because it is its nature, we see the lesson of selfless action. Nature does not force. It does not grasp. It simply is. And in this stillness, in this effortless unfolding, there is peace. Too often, we separate ourselves from nature, losing ourselves in artificial distractions. We spend our days in buildings, in front of screens, surrounded by noise and obligations. We forget that just beyond our doors, a different world exists, one that is not rushed, not demanding, not restless. A world that moves at the pace of the present moment, teaching us that peace has always been within reach. When we step outside and truly observe, we begin to see that life is not a struggle, it is a rhythm. The waves do not fight the shore, they rise and fall in perfect harmony. The moon does not rush to be full, it waxes and wanes in its own time. The mountains do not try to impress, they simply stand, silent and strong. Everything in nature exists exactly as it is meant to, without resistance. And yet, we resist. We resist change. We resist uncertainty. We resist letting go. But when we let go of resistance, we begin to move with life instead of against it. And in that movement, we find freedom. Reconnecting with nature is not just about going outside, it is about seeing deeply. It is about recognizing that the lessons we seek have been surrounding us all along. The patience of a tree, which does not rush its growth but trusts in the slow unfolding of time. The acceptance of a river, which does not hold on to the past but flows forward without hesitation. The stillness of a mountain, which does not chase after what it already is. The more we observe, the more we understand, nature does not struggle with itself. And neither must we. The next time life feels overwhelming, step outside. Watch the sky. Feel the wind. Listen to the stillness. Let nature remind you that peace is not something you must chase, it is something you return to. It is not a place you must find, it is already here. The trees are not asking where they are supposed to be. The rivers are not wondering if they are enough. Everything in nature simply exists, fully present, fully alive. And so can we. Perhaps this is the greatest lesson nature offers: we are not separate from it. The same air that moves through the trees moves through our lungs. The same water that flows through rivers flows through our veins. We are not outsiders in the natural world, we are part of it. And just as the seasons change, just as the sun rises and sets without effort, just as the earth turns without resistance, we too can learn to move with the rhythm of life, to trust in its unfolding, to let go of what is beyond our control and embrace what is. Peace is not a distant dream. It is not something we must struggle for. It is as natural as the breath in our lungs, as present as the ground beneath our feet. It has always been here, waiting for us to remember. And when we do, we realize that the peace we were searching for was never outside of us, it was within us all along. Just as the sky is always vast, no matter how many clouds pass through, our true nature is always still, no matter how much chaos surrounds us. And when we reconnect with that truth, with the simplicity of nature's wisdom. We no longer need to search for peace. We become it. Life is not something to be figured out, nor is happiness something to be acquired. Everything you need to live with peace, with clarity, with a deep sense of fulfillment, already exists within you. The teachings of Buddhism are not abstract concepts meant to be understood intellectually, they are meant to be lived. They are a way of moving through the world with grace, a way of embracing change without fear, a way of finding serenity even in the midst of life's inevitable chaos. There is no perfect moment to begin. No magical day when everything will suddenly make sense. No external sign that will tell you it's time to be free. The path is already beneath your feet. And the moment you decide to walk it, the moment you choose to let go of what no longer serves you, to release attachment, to live with intention, that is the moment transformation begins. Imagine waking up tomorrow and choosing to see the world differently, to move more slowly, to speak with more kindness, to let go of the need to control things beyond your reach. Imagine meeting your thoughts with awareness rather than resistance. Imagine living not in pursuit of happiness, but as a reflection of it. Not as someone who is waiting for peace, but as someone who already carries it. This is not just a dream, it is the reality that becomes possible when you apply these teachings. When you make mindfulness not just something you practice, but something you embody. It starts with small steps. A breath taken with awareness. A moment of stillness in the middle of a busy day. A decision to respond with patience rather than frustration. A choice to release comparison. To quiet the noise of the outside world. To stop chasing and start appreciating. These small moments accumulate. And before you know it, they become the foundation of a life lived with presence, with wisdom, with peace that cannot be shaken by circumstance. Suffering begins in the mind, and so does freedom. The way you see the world shapes the way you experience it. If you resist change, you will suffer when things do not go as planned. If you attach your happiness to external conditions, you will feel lost when they shift. But if you cultivate a mind that is flexible, a heart that is open, a soul that understands the impermanence of all things, then nothing will have the power to disturb your inner peace. And this, above all, is the gift that Buddhism offers, not an escape from life, but a way to embrace it fully. Take a deep breath. Let the weight of expectations fall away. There is nothing you need to become. There is no one you need to impress. You are already enough. The world has conditioned you to believe that you must chase, that you must strive, that you must fix yourself in order to be whole. But what if the only thing you truly needed to do was wake up? Wake up to the present moment. Wake up to the truth that happiness is not something to find, but something to uncover. Wake up to the realization that peace is not something you must reach, it is something you must return to. You are already on this journey. Even the fact that you are here, listening, absorbing, reflecting, means that some part of you is ready for change. Ready to release what no longer aligns with your soul. Ready to step into the version of yourself that does not live in reaction, but in awareness. And the beautiful thing is, you do not need to rush. You do not need to have all the answers today. The only thing you need to do is begin. If this message speaks to you, if you feel the pull to walk this path, know that you are not alone. There is a whole community of seekers, of learners, of individuals choosing to cultivate wisdom and live with intention. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What resonated with you the most? What is one thing you will take with you from this journey? Your words may inspire someone else to begin their own path to freedom. And if you found value in this message, consider sharing it with others. Sometimes, the smallest act of spreading wisdom can create ripples beyond what we can imagine. Perhaps someone you know needs to hear this today. Perhaps, through you, They will find the courage to pause, to breathe, to awaken. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking this time to reflect, to grow, to explore the depths of your own mind. Your journey is yours to walk. But in this moment, we are all walking together. And that, in itself, is a beautiful thing. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so we can continue this journey together. There is so much more to explore, so much wisdom to uncover. Until next time, may you move through life with awareness, with kindness, and with a heart that is truly at peace.